The arrival. David walked through the busy airport terminal, a confident smile on his face. He was dressed sharply in a tailored black suit with a crisp white shirt. As an FBI agent, he always wanted to look professional, even when he was off duty. Today, he was excited. After months of hard work, he was finally heading out for a long-awaited vacation. He had planned this trip for weeks, dreaming of relaxing on a beach far away from his daily duties. The terminal was buzzing with activity. Families rushed to catch flights, couples held hands, and children laughed as they chased each other. David felt a sense of joy and anticipation in the air. He checked his watch. He had plenty of time before his flight. After grabbing a coffee from a nearby cafe, he made his way to the boarding gate. As he walked, David noticed two security guards standing near the entrance to the gate. They were tall and muscular, their uniforms crisp and neat. But as he approached, he caught them whispering and glancing his way. Something about their demeanor made him uneasy. David brushed it off. Maybe they were just having a bad day. He had faced prejudice before, but he had learned to ignore it. He was proud of his work and who he was. David reached the boarding gate, where passengers were already lining up. He was about to join the queue when the guard stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "Excuse me, sir. We need to check your ID," one of the guards said with a stern look. David frowned. "Why? I have a ticket. I'm just trying to board my flight." The second guard crossed his arms, eyeing David with suspicion. "You look a bit suspicious. We have to follow protocol. Show us your identification." David's heart raced. He was used to being treated with respect as an FBI agent, but today felt different. He felt a tight knot in his stomach. Why were they treating him this way? It was clear they were judging him based on his appearance. "Look," David said, keeping his voice calm. "I'm just here to catch a flight. I have my ID and my ticket. I don't understand why you're singling me out." The first guard smirked. "We're not singling you out. We're just doing our job. Now show us your ID." David took a deep breath. He could feel the eyes of other passengers on him, curious and confused. He reached for his wallet and pulled out his FBI badge, ready to show them his true identity. But instead of accepting it, the guards laughed. "What are you, some kind of comedian? That badge looks fake." Anger flared inside him. "You have no idea who I am," he replied, his voice low but steady. "I'm an FBI agent. I need to board this flight." The guards exchanged glances, their laughter fading. David could sense the tension rising. The other passengers began to murmur, some shaking their heads in disbelief. They could see how unfairly David was being treated. One woman, an elderly lady with kind eyes, stepped forward. "Excuse me, young man," she said softly. "Why are they treating you this way? It's not right." David nodded, grateful for her support. "I don't know, ma'am. They think I'm suspicious just because I'm black." The guards shifted uncomfortably, but their pride wouldn't let them back down. "We need to follow protocol," the first guard insisted, crossing his arms tighter. Feeling the weight of the situation, David stood tall. "If you're going to stop me, you need to explain why. I have my rights." At that moment, a crowd began to gather. People were pulling out their phones, recording the incident. David's heart raced. He didn't want this to escalate, but he also refused to let them treat him unfairly. "Please, just let me board my flight," he pleaded. "I have a job to do, and I don't deserve this treatment." The guards exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from arrogance to uncertainty. The atmosphere in the terminal grew charged with tension. David knew he had to take action. He could feel the eyes of the passengers on him, some nodding in support, others looking worried. He reached for his phone, ready to call his supervisor and verify his identity. Just then, the second guard stepped forward, trying to regain control of the situation. "Let's not make this a bigger deal than it needs to be," he said, attempting to sound authoritative. "Just show us your ID, and we can sort this out." David took another deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I'm not just a regular passenger. I'm an FBI agent. I have the right to board this flight without being harassed." The first guard rolled his eyes. "Yeah, right. We hear that all the time from people trying to pull a fast one." David's patience began to wear thin. He had faced discrimination before, but this felt different. He wanted to stand up not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly. "Listen," he said firmly, "this isn't just about me. It's about how people are judged by the color of their skin. This isn't right." The crowd around them grew restless, and the atmosphere thickened with tension. David's heart pounded as he prepared for whatever would come next. Would they finally let him board, or would this situation escalate into something he couldn't control? In that moment, he knew that he had to remain strong. Whatever happened next would not only affect him, but also the countless others who faced similar injustices every day. The confrontation. The tension in the terminal reached a breaking point as more people gathered around David and the security guards. Whispers filled the air, a mix of disbelief and anger from the bystanders who couldn't believe what they were witnessing. David felt their eyes on him, urging him to stand firm. "Why are you still standing there? Just show them your ID." Someone shouted from the crowd, their voice laced with frustration. David turned to see a young man shaking his head in disbelief. "Exactly." Another passenger added, "This is ridiculous. They can't treat you like this." The first guard looked increasingly uncomfortable. "This isn't a public spectacle," he snapped, trying to regain control. "We're just following security protocols." David took a step closer, holding his head high. "Then let's get this over with. Call your supervisor. I want this on record." The second guard hesitated, but finally relented. "Fine. I'll call him," he said, pulling out his radio. "This is ridiculous," he muttered under his breath. As the guard communicated with his supervisor, David could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The crowd remained silent, their eyes focused on the unfolding drama. It felt like all eyes were on him, and the pressure was mounting. A few moments later, a tall man in a dark uniform approached the scene. His expression was stern as he took in the situation. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice commanding attention. The first guard stepped forward, gesturing towards David. "This man is refusing to comply with security checks. We believe he's not who he says he is." The supervisor raised an eyebrow, turning his gaze to David. "Is that so? Can you explain what happened?" David took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "I'm an FBI agent, and I have every right to be treated with respect. These guards stopped me without any valid reason and accused me of being suspicious solely based on my appearance." The supervisor looked at the guards, then back at David. "Is that true? Did you ask for his identification?" The second guard fidgeted, clearly uncomfortable. "Well, he wouldn't show us his ID at first," he admitted, avoiding eye contact. David interjected, "I was just trying to explain that I'm an agent. I wasn't trying to hide anything. But instead of listening, they made assumptions about me." The supervisor nodded, processing the information. "Let me see your ID," he instructed David. David quickly retrieved his FBI badge from his wallet and handed it over. The supervisor examined it closely, his brow furrowing as he scrutinized the details. "You are who you say you are," he finally stated, looking back at the guards. "And you have no grounds for stopping him." The crowd erupted in murmurs of approval, their support clear. The guards exchanged worried glances, their authority slipping away. "Apologize to him," the supervisor ordered, his voice firm. Both guards shifted uncomfortably, their faces flushed with embarrassment. Sorry," the first guard mumbled, clearly unwilling to admit their mistake. The second guard followed suit, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, sorry." David felt a mix of relief and frustration. "You need to understand that this kind of behavior is unacceptable. I may not be the only one you treat this way," he said, looking directly at the guards. "Racial profiling is wrong." The supervisor nodded. You're right. This needs to be addressed. We'll make sure this doesn't happen again. As David stood there, the crowd began to disperse, but not before several passengers voiced their support. You handled that well. One woman exclaimed, I would have lost my cool. Thank you for standing up for yourself. Another man added, giving David an encouraging nod. Feeling a wave of gratitude wash over him, David smiled back. Thank you all for your support. It means a lot. The supervisor turned to him. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Let me make sure you get on your flight without any further issues. David nodded, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. I appreciate it. I just want to enjoy my vacation. As he walked toward the gate, he felt a sense of empowerment. He had stood up for himself in a difficult situation, and his actions had resonated with others. But deep down, he knew this wasn't just about him. It was about a larger issue, an ongoing struggle that many faced every day. When he finally reached the boarding area, he was relieved to see the plane waiting for him. He made his way to the entrance, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. He couldn't wait to escape the stress of the airport and enjoy his much-deserved vacation. But as he stepped onto the plane, a thought crossed his mind. Would he really be able to relax knowing that there were still people out there who judged others based on their appearance? He hoped that by sharing his story, he could help create awareness and change the way people viewed each other. Taking his seat, David looked out the window as the plane prepared for takeoff. He took a deep breath, focusing on the future. He was determined to make the most of his trip and to stand up for what was right, no matter where he was. The flight. As the plane taxied down the runway, David felt the adrenaline from the earlier confrontation slowly fading. He took a deep breath, trying to shake off the tension that had built up during the encounter with the security guards. The flight attendants moved through the aisle, offering drinks and snacks to the passengers, their cheerful smiles contrasting sharply with the turmoil David had just experienced. He glanced around the cabin, taking in the diverse group of travelers. A couple was seated nearby, sharing a laugh over their in-flight magazine. A young child sat a few rows ahead, pointing out the clouds outside with innocent excitement. David felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the world wasn't so bad after all. Maybe there were more good people than he realized. Just as the plane ascended into the sky, David's phone buzzed with a message from his partner, Lisa. Hey, how's the trip so far? She had written, filled with emojis. He smiled, feeling a wave of warmth wash over him as he thought of her. Going well. Just had a little run-in with airport security. But I'm on the plane now, heading to a much-needed vacation. David quickly typed back, sending a picture of the clouds outside the window. As he waited for a reply, he looked around the cabin again, noticing a flight attendant who seemed to be hovering near his seat. It was the same attendant who had served him earlier, the one who had been part of the incident. Her smile was polite, but there was a nervousness in her demeanor that caught his attention. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly, her tone cautious. "I just wanted to apologize for the way things were handled back at the gate. I didn't realize you were an FBI agent." David raised an eyebrow, surprised by her approach. "Thank you for saying that," he replied sincerely. "It was a stressful situation." She nodded, her expression sincere. "I want you to know that not everyone feels the way those guards do. We're trained to keep everyone safe, but sometimes people let their biases affect their judgment. I'm truly sorry that happened to you." David appreciated her honesty. "It means a lot to hear that. I hope this incident can lead to some positive changes in how people treat each other." The flight attendant smiled, clearly relieved. "I'll make sure to share this with my supervisors. We need to do better." As she walked away, David felt a renewed sense of hope. If more people were willing to listen and change, maybe there was a chance for progress. He continued to reflect on the importance of standing up against discrimination, even in the smallest ways. His phone buzzed again, breaking his train of thought. Lisa had replied with a cheerful message. "Can't wait to hear all about your adventures. Enjoy every moment." David felt a warmth in his heart. Lisa always had a way of lifting his spirits. He typed back, "Thanks. I will. Love you," and put the phone away. He settled back in his seat, letting the gentle hum of the plane soothe him. As the flight continued, David took the time to think about his mission. He was traveling to a conference aimed at improving community relations, discussing ways to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the communities they served. He felt this was more important than ever, especially after what had happened at the airport. The hours passed, and the flight attendant returned with the beverage cart, this time stopping to chat with David. "What's the conference about?" she asked, genuinely interested. "It's about community policing and finding ways to build trust between officers and the people they serve," David explained. "After what happened today, I feel even more motivated to make a difference." She nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds really important. I think it's great that you're taking the time to help make things better." David smiled, appreciating her encouragement. "Thank you. It's not just my job. It's a passion. I believe we can create change if we work together." The conversation flowed easily, and David felt grateful for the friendly interaction. It reminded him that not everyone shared the same prejudices as the security guards. There were people in the world willing to listen, learn, and grow. As the plane flew over the ocean, David's heart swelled with a mix of determination and hope. He was ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead, not just for himself, but for everyone who had faced discrimination and bias. He would be a voice for change, and he would do it with strength and compassion. The plane began its descent, and David felt a sense of excitement bubbling within him. He was about to land in a new place, ready for new experiences. He thought of Lisa, the conference, and the potential to make a positive impact. This trip wasn't just about escaping. It was about embracing a mission that was bigger than himself. As the wheels touched down on the tarmac, David's heart raced. This was the beginning of something special, a chance to connect with others and make a difference. He couldn't wait to see what awaited him on the other side of the terminal, knowing that the journey was just beginning. The conference begins. The moment David stepped off the plane, he felt a rush of fresh air greet him. The airport was bustling with people, and the sounds of excitement filled the terminal. David checked his watch. He had a few hours before the conference started, giving him some time to collect his thoughts and prepare for the day ahead. As he made his way through the airport, he spotted a cafe and decided to grab a quick coffee. He ordered a large cup, hoping the caffeine would fuel his energy for the busy day. While waiting, he glanced around, taking in the diverse crowd. Families reunited, friends laughing, and travelers hurrying to their gates filled him with hope. Each person had their own story, and many of them likely shared experiences similar to his. After grabbing his coffee, David found a quiet corner in the terminal to sit and gather his thoughts. He pulled out his notebook and reviewed the agenda for the conference. Topics ranged from community engagement to effective communication strategies for law enforcement. He wanted to ensure his contributions were impactful, and he felt the weight of his responsibilities on his shoulders. Just then, he noticed a group of attendees walking by, chatting enthusiastically. They were all dressed in business attire, and David recognized some of them from the invitation list. They were prominent figures in community relations, and he felt a surge of nervous energy. He had come to learn, but he also wanted to make connections and share his insights. Taking a deep breath, David stood up and decided to approach the group. As he introduced himself, the conversation flowed naturally. They discussed the importance of building trust in communities and shared stories of their own experiences with discrimination and bias. Suddenly, a familiar face entered the room. It was the flight attendant who had spoken with him on the plane. She spotted David and waved, a bright smile lighting up her face. "I didn't expect to see you here," she exclaimed as she approached him. "Great to see you. I didn't know you were attending," David replied, surprised but pleased. "I'm here to represent my airline and participate in discussions about improving customer service and understanding diversity in the workplace," she explained. David admired her initiative. "That's fantastic. It's important for everyone to learn from these experiences. They continued to chat, and David felt a sense of camaraderie. It was refreshing to meet someone who shared his passion for positive change. After a few minutes, they exchanged contact information, promising to stay in touch after the conference. As the conference kicked off, David found himself sitting in a large auditorium filled with eager participants. The opening speaker, a well-respected community leader, took the stage. He spoke passionately about the need for empathy and understanding in policing. David listened intently, taking notes and nodding along with the crowd. After the keynote address, it was time for breakout sessions. David chose one focused on community policing strategies. As he sat among the attendees, he couldn't help but feel inspired. The discussions were lively, with people sharing their insights and asking important questions. David raised his hand, eager to contribute. "I believe that creating community programs is essential. We need to engage with residents in positive ways, so they see us as allies, not enemies." His voice resonated through the room, and he felt a sense of empowerment as people turned to listen. The facilitator nodded, encouraging others to share their thoughts. "Yes, engaging with the community is crucial. Has anyone implemented successful programs?" David listened as various attendees shared their successful initiatives, from youth mentorship programs to community outreach events. Each story reinforced his belief that change was possible, but it required effort from both law enforcement and the communities they served. During a break, David stepped outside to get some fresh air. He felt a wave of gratitude for being part of something bigger than himself. The conversations were enlightening, and he was excited to be a part of a movement focused on positive change. As he sipped his coffee, he noticed a group of local community members arriving at the conference. They were there to voice their concerns and share their perspectives on policing. David felt a sense of anticipation. He hoped the discussions would lead to meaningful dialogue, bridging the gap between law enforcement and the people they served. As the conference continued, David found himself increasingly motivated to make a difference. He realized that every interaction mattered, whether in a high-stakes environment like law enforcement or in everyday life. It was all about building connections and fostering understanding. With renewed determination, David returned to the auditorium for the next session. He was ready to learn, share, and collaborate. He felt like he was on the right path to creating the change he wished to see, and he was eager to bring those lessons back home. As the day came to a close, David reflected on the conversations he had engaged in, the ideas he had exchanged, and the connections he had made. The conference was just the beginning of a journey towards positive change in law enforcement and the communities they served. And David was ready to be a part of it all. Unforeseen consequences. As the conference wrapped up, David felt a sense of accomplishment. He had made valuable connections, shared his insights, and learned from others. The energy in the room was electric as attendees exchanged contact information, promising to collaborate in the future. David was excited about the potential for positive change, but little did he know that his day was about to take an unexpected turn. After saying goodbye to his new friends, David decided to grab a quick bite to eat before heading to the airport. He found a small diner nearby, where the aroma of fresh burgers and fries filled the air. As he sat down at the counter, he felt a sense of relief wash over him. The conference had been intense, but it had also reignited his passion for making a difference. While he waited for his meal, David pulled out his phone to check his messages. To his surprise, there were several notifications from social media. A video clip had gone viral, showing the incident on the plane earlier that day. His heart raced as he clicked on the link. The video captured the moment when the flight attendant spilled coffee on him, but what shocked him most was the commentary that followed. The video had taken on a life of its own, and the comment section was flooded with opinions, some supportive, others hostile. People were quick to jump to conclusions, labeling the flight attendant as a racist and David as a victim. While he appreciated the support, he was unsettled by how the situation was being portrayed. It felt like a double-edged sword. Suddenly, he felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to see a man in a suit standing behind him. The man had an anxious look on his face. "Excuse me, are you David?" he asked. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" David replied, intrigued. "I'm Mark, a producer for a news outlet. We'd like to interview you about the incident on the flight today. It's gaining a lot of attention, and we believe your perspective is important," Mark explained. David hesitated. He hadn't anticipated being thrust into the spotlight like this. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure I want to be part of this," he admitted, unsure about how to proceed. Mark sensed his apprehension. "I understand, but this is a chance to share your story and potentially spark important conversations about race and respect in our society. You could help change how people view these incidents." David pondered for a moment. He had always believed in the power of dialogue, but he wasn't sure if now was the right time. He had just wanted to attend the conference and learn, not become a headline. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Of course. I'll give you my card. Please reach out if you decide you want to talk," Mark said, handing him a business card before walking away. David felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. He finished his meal quickly and left the diner, still thinking about the opportunity that had been presented to him. He wanted to share his experience, but he also feared the backlash that might come from it. As he headed to the airport, David couldn't shake off the feeling that he was standing at a crossroads. The incident on the plane had become more than just a personal experience. It was now part of a larger conversation about race and respect. He considered the weight of his words and how they could impact others. Arriving at the airport, David proceeded to check in for his flight. He noticed a group of people whispering and pointing at him. The realization struck him like a bolt of lightning. They had seen the video. He tried to brush it off, but the looks made him uneasy. Boarding the plane, he took his seat and tried to focus on the upcoming journey. But his mind raced with thoughts about the interview, the video, and how to handle the attention. The plane took off, and he felt the familiar sensation of ascent, but this time it was accompanied by a sense of unease. Once in the air, David pulled out his notebook and began writing down his thoughts. He wanted to express his feelings, the importance of empathy, and the need for respectful communication. He knew that every moment mattered, and he wanted to make sure that his voice was heard. As the flight continued, David received a notification on his phone. It was a message from the flight attendant he had met earlier. "Hey, I just saw the video. I'm so sorry for what happened. I want you to know that it was never my intention to hurt you," she wrote. David felt a pang of understanding. He knew that people often acted out of fear or misunderstanding. He decided to respond, reassuring her that he held no ill feelings. He wanted to build bridges, not walls. When the flight landed, David was met with a mix of emotions. As he walked through the terminal, he noticed people looking at him. He knew that some saw him as a victim, but he wanted to be seen as someone who could foster change. Once he got home, he sat down and reflected on the day. The conference, the attention, the video. It all felt surreal. He knew he had a choice to make. Would he step into the spotlight and share his story, or would he retreat into the background? David realized that every moment held the power to spark change. He wanted to take that chance. It was time to transform his experience into something meaningful, to share not just his story but the stories of others. As he picked up his phone to call Mark, he felt a sense of purpose rise within him. This was only the beginning of a much larger conversation. The spotlight. David sat in his living room, staring at his phone. After much contemplation, he had decided to go ahead with the interview. He knew that sharing his story could help others, and he felt a sense of responsibility to do so. He took a deep breath, dialed Mark's number, and waited. "Hello, Mark speaking," the producer answered enthusiastically. "Hi, Mark, it's David. I'd like to do the interview," David said, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. "Fantastic. Let's set something up. How about tomorrow morning? I'll come to your place," Mark suggested. "Sure, that works for me. David replied, eager to share his side of the story. The next day, Mark arrived early, his camera equipment in tow. He set up in David's living room, ensuring everything was ready for the interview. David felt a knot in his stomach as he watched Mark adjust the lights and microphone. He reminded himself that this was an opportunity to voice his thoughts and experiences. "Are you ready?" Mark asked, his friendly demeanor helping to ease David's nerves. "Yeah, let's do this," David said, trying to project confidence. As the camera started rolling, Mark introduced the segment. "Today we have David, a man who recently experienced a shocking incident on a flight. Thank you for joining us, David." "Thank you for having me," David replied, his heart racing. Mark began with some questions about the incident. "Can you take us back to that moment? What were you feeling when the coffee was spilled on you?" David closed his eyes for a moment, recalling the situation. "It was unexpected and humiliating. I felt like I was being judged for something I had no control over. It was hurtful." Mark nodded, encouraging him to continue. "And what was your reaction when you saw the flight attendant's expression?" "I could see she was embarrassed. It's important to remember that people often act out of fear or misunderstanding. I didn't want to escalate the situation. I just wanted to handle it calmly," David said, emphasizing the need for empathy. Mark shifted the conversation to the video that had gone viral. "How has the public reaction affected you?" David hesitated for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "It's overwhelming. Some people are supportive, but others seem to jump to conclusions. I worry about how the incident is being portrayed." The interview flowed smoothly, with Mark asking thought-provoking questions. David spoke about the importance of addressing racism and the need for respectful dialogue. He shared stories of friends and family who had faced similar situations, highlighting that he was not alone in this experience. As they wrapped up, Mark smiled. "Thank you, David. Your perspective is incredibly valuable, and I believe it will resonate with many viewers." "Thank you for giving me this platform," David replied, feeling a sense of relief. After the interview, David felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He had shared his story, and he hoped it would inspire others to reflect on their actions and attitudes. However, he knew that this was just the beginning. The video was set to be released in a few days, and he wondered how people would respond. Later that evening, David logged onto social media to check the buzz surrounding the incident. His phone buzzed with notifications, and he could see the views on the video were climbing rapidly. He scrolled through comments, feeling a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Some comments were positive, expressing support and understanding. However, he also noticed a few negative remarks that questioned his motives and painted him as an opportunist. It stung, but he reminded himself of the importance of focusing on the positive. The next day, as David went about his routine, he received a phone call from his friend Sarah. "Hey, I just watched your interview. You did amazing," she exclaimed. "Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate it," David replied, feeling encouraged. "I was thinking, you should hold a discussion or a forum about these issues. You have a voice that needs to be heard," she suggested. David pondered her idea. "That's not a bad thought. Maybe I could organize something in the community. It could be a way to bring people together and talk about race and respect." "That's a great plan. I can help you organize it," Sarah offered eagerly. As they brainstormed ideas, David felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that turning his experience into action was crucial. By engaging with his community, he could foster understanding and encourage open discussions about racism and empathy. In the days that followed, David and Sarah worked tirelessly to put the event together. They secured a venue, reached out to local leaders, and promoted the discussion on social media. David felt energized by the support he received from friends and family, and he was hopeful that the event would create a meaningful impact. The night of the event arrived, and David stood nervously at the entrance of the community center. He was excited yet anxious about how people would respond. As attendees began to filter in, he felt a sense of warmth. The room quickly filled with a diverse group of people, eager to engage in conversations about race and respect. David opened the discussion by sharing his story, recounting the incident on the plane and the lessons he had learned. He emphasized the importance of empathy and understanding, encouraging everyone to reflect on their experiences. The audience listened intently, nodding in agreement. As the discussion unfolded, people began sharing their own stories and experiences. The atmosphere was charged with emotion as participants spoke about their struggles and triumphs. David felt a sense of unity in the room, realizing that they were all connected by their shared experiences. By the end of the night, David had transformed from a man who experienced an unfortunate incident into a catalyst for change. He realized that by sharing his story and facilitating this dialogue, he was helping others to find their voices too. As the event concluded, David felt a sense of accomplishment. He knew that this was just the beginning of a larger journey toward understanding and respect. The road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to take on the responsibility of being a voice for change. He had turned a moment of humiliation into a powerful movement, and he was determined to keep the conversation going. A new beginning. The sun rose over the community center, casting a warm glow on the event that had taken place the night before. David woke up feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. He had never expected the discussion to have such a profound impact on him and everyone who attended. As he brewed his morning coffee, he reflected on the powerful stories shared and the connections formed during the event. His phone buzzed with messages. Friends and attendees were reaching out to express their gratitude. David smiled, feeling a sense of pride. He had created a safe space for people to share their experiences and thoughts on race and respect. He quickly typed out replies, thanking everyone for their support and enthusiasm. Later that day, he met with Sarah at a local cafe. They sat outside, enjoying the pleasant weather while discussing the event. "I can't believe how well it went. People were so engaged," Sarah exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Yeah, I was amazed at how open everyone was. It felt like we really made a difference," David replied, feeling the same joy. "I think we should do it again," Sarah suggested. "Maybe even make it a monthly thing. We could bring in speakers or hold workshops." David nodded, considering her idea. "That sounds great. We could create a series of events focused on different topics, like racism, respect, and empathy. It could really help build a stronger community." As they continued to brainstorm, David's phone rang. It was Mark, the producer from the interview. "Hey, David. I just wanted to follow up after the airing of your segment. The response has been incredible. People are really connecting with your story," Mark said, his voice brimming with excitement. "Thank you. That's great to hear," David replied, feeling his heart race. "I'm glad it resonated with so many people." "Absolutely. I think you should consider a follow-up segment. Your journey and the discussion you held could inspire even more people," Mark suggested. David felt a surge of confidence. "I'd be open to that." Sharing more about the discussions we're having could really shine a light on the importance of these conversations. As they talked, David began to envision a larger platform for his message. He realized that his voice had the potential to reach many more people, helping them understand the importance of empathy and respect. "Let's definitely plan something," he said, energized by the possibilities. After hanging up, David turned to Sarah. "Mark thinks I should do a follow-up segment about the discussion. It could really help spread awareness." "That's fantastic. You've got to share what you're doing with the community," Sarah encouraged, her enthusiasm infectious. With renewed purpose, David began planning not just for the next community discussion, but also for how to expand the movement. He wanted to create a series of events that brought people together, fostering open dialogue and understanding. In the weeks that followed, David and Sarah worked tirelessly to organize more events. They reached out to local organizations, schools, and community leaders, inviting them to participate in discussions about race, respect, and unity. David also began collaborating with Mark to promote these events through his platform. As word spread, The turnout at the events grew. More and more people came to share their stories and listen to others. David found himself not just facilitating discussions, but also learning from the experiences of others. Each event became a tapestry of voices, woven together by shared experiences and a common goal of understanding. One day, as David prepared for a particularly large event at a local high school, he received a call from a national news outlet. "We've been following your story, and we're impressed by what you're doing in your community. We'd love to feature you in a segment," the reporter said. David's heart raced. This was an opportunity to reach an even wider audience. "I'd be honored," he replied, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. He knew that this was a chance to amplify the message of empathy and respect. The day of the news segment arrived, and David stood in front of the camera, ready to share his journey. He spoke passionately about the importance of open dialogue, encouraging others to engage in conversations that could lead to understanding and healing. After the segment aired, David received an outpouring of support from viewers across the country. People reached out to share their own stories, inspired by his willingness to speak out. David felt a deep sense of responsibility to continue this work, to keep the conversation going. As months passed, David became a well-known figure in the community and beyond. He was invited to speak at schools, community centers, and even conferences focused on race relations. With each speech, he emphasized the power of empathy and understanding, urging everyone to recognize their shared humanity. David often reflected on the incident that had sparked this journey. What began as a humiliating experience had turned into a powerful movement for change. He had transformed his pain into purpose, using his voice to advocate for a better world. One evening after a successful event, David sat down with Sarah at their favorite cafe. "Can you believe how far we've come?" he asked, sipping his coffee. "It's incredible. I never imagined we could create such a ripple effect," Sarah replied, her smile radiant. David nodded, feeling grateful for the journey. "It's all about the connections we make and the stories we share. Together, we can inspire change." As they talked, David felt a sense of hope for the future. He knew that while challenges remained, the conversations they were fostering were making a difference. The journey was far from over, but he was committed to continuing the fight for understanding and respect. Together with his community, he was paving the way for a brighter tomorrow.